I'm Steve Benford. Thanks very much for inviting me. It's been a great morning so far. Fascinating opportunity to talk about computing and traditional music, and they're both interests of mine. So I'm a professor in computer science at University of Nottingham. I'm part of the Mixed Reality Lab, and for a long time, more than a couple of decades, been interested in sort of creative applications of technologies, designing and studying. We've worked a lot with external groups of artists who come to us and kind of with ideas for unusual performances they want to make, and we try and respond to them technically, and then the deal is we get to study them and we sort of write conceptual papers about, from a computer science point of view, what we think was going on. So we've written about topics like the deliberate use of discomfort in interaction design and how it provokes reflection or enlightenment, and we've written bits of work about trajectories and contesting control with machines but also with your own body. That's the kind of the staple of the kind of the work I do. But usually it's kind of working with external artists. I'm the computer scientist in the picture. But I'm also a local folk musician in Nottingham, something I've done since I was 8, and my dad was a folk musician in bands, and I thought that was normal. It turns out it's not at all normal, but I didn't know at the time, and so I sort of learnt to play by listening to him and sort of playing with him as well. And I go to a couple of folk clubs. They've both been running for more than 40 years in Nottingham. What I like about that is I'm one of the young people at the club, which is great. They still would call me the youngster, I think, which is fantastic. And I play a little bit of music for dancing and kind of ceilidhs and do a bit of that kind of work. And when I have time, I'll go to an Irish session around Nottingham, and there's a couple each week that you could go to. So all of this is just local sort of amateur playing, but I take it seriously. And then recently, I suppose those two threads of my life have inevitably collided. So they collided initially by doing some kind of autoethnographic or even properly ethnographic studies of what was going on with folk music. So we published a study more than 10 years ago about an ethnography of Irish music sessions and how you had to design technologies to be discrete within them. How within at least some of the sessions at Nottingham, for example, it's actually okay to get out your phone and make a phone call in the middle of everyone playing and look at the football scores. That's no problem. But if you get out the sheet music, it's a bit of a trickier situation. And so what you saw was people doing things like having very small notes on their phones that were just the first couple of bars of the next tune that they could segue into it. And once they'd done that, they could then carry on playing by ear. So we found that to be really interesting about how you introduce technologies into a particular kind of etiquette. And then more recently, we've published some work about what folk clubs did during the pandemic and how they tried to go online and how that changed things in interesting ways. I think the most interesting finding for me from that was that the club we studied ended up, the technologies lure you into recording everything. Zoom or whatever you're using allows you to record stuff, and that means you can then publish a catch-up show, which is great, isn't it? Except now nobody feels like they can repeat the material that they would normally do. So normally somebody goes to the club and they think, I haven't practiced all week, and going up the stairs they think, I'll do that number, I did it 3 weeks ago, but it's fine. Whereas through a whole year of the club, people didn't repeat anything. And there was this massive pressure on them to keep reinventing and arranging new songs. And you might think that's a good thing, you might not, but a very subtle feature of the technology transformed the kind of practice. Anyway, that's the kind of stuff we were doing for a while. And then I got interested in actually bringing it into my own practice, because I think it's kind of good, for everyone in the lab to have, if possible, a personal thread of practice research, even if it's a small part of what we do, something where you really sort of put yourself in the picture and sort of put yourself to the test with technology. So this project here is mine, and it's the creation of a particular musical instrument called the Carillon guitar. And in many ways, it's a regular acoustic guitar. And so the first thing I'll do is, if you don't mind, play you a quick tune. I'm here, I've got a guitar in my hand. Why wouldn't I? And then afterwards we'll talk about why it isn't just a regular acoustic guitar. But rather than playing it now, it just is some bloke playing a guitar. That's all that's going on here. A quick couple of tunes. Yes, that's So I don't often play solo pieces, but the folk club might be one of the opportunities I'd grab to do that. Most often what I do is accompany people at sessions, and I will come to accompanying at the end of the talk again and get back to folk R&M and things. But I'll talk about the instrument first of all. So yeah, in many ways it's a regular guitar, but there's one way in which it isn't, and that is the aim of creating this instrument was to set out to create a musical instrument that would in some sense capture and tell its life story as it passed among people. So to create an instrument with a very personal history of how it was made, where it had been, who had played it and what had happened to it. And the motivation for that idea can be found in lots of places. It's in the literature, so you can read books such as Accordion Crimes, if you read that. It's a great book about a kind of story associated with an accordion that is passed down generations. Films like The Red Violin, if you've seen them. There's a whole bunch of these kind of literary tropes based upon instruments that tell stories and get possessed and get passed on among people. But more practically, it's also very much part of the guitar industry, perhaps more so than pretty much any other musical instrument. So the guitar industry trades on the identities of instruments. Fender and Gibson and all the other brands are desperately reissuing recreations of vintage 1962 whatevers, or even particular guitars, Hendrix's Strat recreated that you can go and buy. And artists, of course, are routinely competing now to sign up for signature edition guitars they've apparently designed and has their name on them, so on. Eric Clapton, I don't know how many guitars he's designed, but he can't have time to record any more albums. There are that many. Or you can pay $1,000 or so to Fender, and they will custom distress your guitar in the factory. They will take torches and hammers to it, and as an added value service in their custom shop, they will beat it up for you. And they beat it up according to the fiction or persona of someone who might have played it. So there's a version of a beaten up guitar which is, it's been in the box for 50 years and it's never been played. And you open it and the paint's meant to have faded, but it's otherwise spotless. Versus the Road Warrior guitar that's completely damaged. Versus the heavy metal one, that's my favourite, where certain frets are worn and distressed according to a fictional pattern of play that the instruments have. So this is a serious business. However you find it personally, and it's hotly debated in the guitar press and guitar magazines between people who hate it and people who love it. It's a thing, and that these instruments are bought and sold and traded and part upon their identity, the stories they tell. So we thought it'd be great to do that with an instrument. So we thought we'd do it from the start. And so when we made this guitar, we have tried to document everything we could about it. So the luthier took oodles and oodles of pictures of videos of choosing the words, coming up with the design, putting the instrument together, and so on. The first ever song he played on it, that's recorded. And then we started to loan it to people. So it went on stage with a few quite well-known musicians who very generously talked about it. It appeared on an album or two. But mostly it's been loaned to local folks. It's been a guitar in residence at the folk club, and it's been around people's homes for a month at a time, and each of them has made some videos from their repertoire, and I've written about it. And we're nearly 10 years into this project now, and it's still going. And if you look up carolynguitar.com, God knows, we're at blog post 111 or something, with a whole rambling series of histories. There's one more angle to it, and that is you can invoke the history by scanning the guitar with your phone. And unfortunately I can't get my phone to talk to the laptop to the projector, so you'll just have to, I'll show you afterwards, or you take my word for it. But the markings here, this crazy Celtic knotwork, which is very sort of Marmite design for a contemporary guitar, functions a little bit like QR codes. I can scan it with my phone, and there are 6 points of interaction, and I can get it to conjure up material. So it might play me a video from its archive, give me a certificate of its provenance or whatever. And I can set up what it does according to who I give it to. So if I loan it to you, I might configure it to tell a story that I think you'll like, or when I go on stage, were it working, I would have several different videos that I could bring up on stage and play along to, or talk about, or whatever. So there's a kind of an attempt, albeit a bit of a clumsy one, to link the instrument to its memory in the act of performance, if you like. You can somehow perform its identity and bring that into what you do. Just as an aside, it does that using a technology called art codes, which is a lot unlike QR codes, really, because you can learn to draw your own. You just follow a few simple drawing rules, and you can kind of sketch out these recognisable designs and codes. And people who are into graphic design sort of love this, because it has a lot of sort of creative freedom about how you can go about decorating an everyday object with kind of these moments of or patterns of interactivity. Anyway, so time's pushing, I'm sure. So knowing I was kind of coming over here today and been absolutely fascinated by folk R&N and now all the other projects I'm hearing about, I thought I'd have a go on folk R&N, but I thought I'd approach it from the perspective of being an accompanist. Eventually I do play the tenor banjo. I'll probably learn to play these tunes as tunes. But all I've done so far is composed a bunch of tunes and stuck them together into a sequence of several tunes, and had a few runs at trying to accompany them to see where it'll take me, and I'll have another run now. And then afterwards I'll ask you what you think. And then after I've heard what you think, I might tell you what I think about it as well. But this is a sort of folk R&N set as an accompanist. Yeah, thank you.
I can press play.
I've got a few, that'd be great, thank you. I've no idea what the volume's set up to be, so you might have to ride the faders if you wouldn't mind, thank you.
Oh. Let me plug in this.
I wonder how they go. I can vaguely remember. I appreciate a picture of Stockholm is not great for this audience, but lovely for the one at home. pretty much done. I just thought I'd ask you how you thought either I was doing or Folk R&M was doing there in its sequencing of sets of tunes and so on. And I've got a few opinions of my own that I could share with you.
She wasn't listening to you.
Well, yes, absolutely, that's true. Although that's pretty much the usual situation when I play in sessions as well. So, I don't joke. Yeah, that's pretty much how it always works. But yeah, that's true. She certainly wasn't. Yeah, any other... Yeah.
What happens to... Well, how is this added to the story of the guitar now?
Yeah, well, I'll certainly... I mean, the obvious thing is that you need to blog, write about it and so on. I think the really interesting thing to do would be to get Carolyn to conjure up tunes from Folk R&M live, possibly ones that I've never heard before, which would be a really fascinating challenge to have a go at. So, yeah, that would be the logical extension, was I show this guitar to the phone and it says, right, here's a tune, have a go. I think that'd be a great experiment to try.
Did you generate a number of tunes and play them as they were, or did you select a few to make this set?
I generated a small set, about somewhere between 20 and 30, of which I selected 4 for this set, and actually there's a set of jigs as well. So my bar for using the tunes was relatively low. About 50% of them made it into something that I would have a go at, and the temperature settings were usually 1.1 or up to 1.2 on one or two occasions.
It sounded like high temperature outputs.
Sounds like what?
High temperature outputs.
Oh.
The fact that there were a lot of fast passages, triplets,
Yeah.
are not that common usually.
So I like those, although they weren't very standard embellishment. At least they were something. You know what I mean? Something that made the ear move a bit and go, okay, yeah, that, and injected a bit of like, so I quite like those high temperature settings.
And for me, the piano is a melody instrument, and this is a bit tough because it's an accompaniment. It provides some harmonic and rhythmic addition to the music, so it was taken on the melody here.
Yeah.
And none of the ornamentation that is very easy to do on the flute or the accordion or the fiddle is possible on the piano because of the weighted keys unless it's very slow.
Yeah, true. I mean, there are some terrific melody players on piano, but yes, it's not very common for all sorts of reasons. Yeah, so I mean, I just chose that because at least available to me in the time available were no sounds that I didn't find awful, that was trying to simulate traditional Irish music, and the piano was the thing that I could most live with in my ear. Yeah, so it's as simple as that. So yes, ideally, something better would have been great.
Actually, there was a rhythmic structure that Folk R&M maintained from the start to the end, and that was very pleasing. But the downside was the downside was the velocity. Like, if we can do something about the velocity, like as you said, handling the weight of the keys in the piano, it would be very great.
Yeah, I think if I'm interpreting what you said correctly, I mean, yeah. So I found as an accompanist, it's absolutely constant pace, rock solid timing, and the fact that it's not phased by anything I do were real pluses. Okay, it didn't freak out, and that gives me lots of space to try and add the human element. I found its lack of dynamics really annoying. That if I back off, it doesn't back off. If I go up, it doesn't go up. That was the downside.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, similar observation. You supplied all of the dynamics, but then also as the accompaniment, you were able to change the vibe, right? Depending on like, okay, now I'm going to be strumming like bar chords, and now I'm doing these open things, and I'm going to arpeggiate a little bit. So there was a kind of flatness and consistency to the MIDI, whereas you were. You're like, okay, I feel like making it different now.
Yeah. Some other reflections I've kind of got are I mean, they're mostly about its playing, but come back to composition in a minute. So as came up in the questions before, what it doesn't do is repeat each repeat of the tune. It doesn't push it a bit harder or embellish it or you know take the game to another level. And I would expect most players in a session to do that. To you know we'd find the first time through we'd be quite steady, and then after that, if it's going well, we're just going at it. So it doesn't do any of that. But the real thing it doesn't do, and I don't know how it would because of the lack of training data, is it doesn't sequence tunes into sets. And the real thing about Irish sessions is that's what it's about. People, I don't know how much they care. I mean, new tunes do find their way into sessions, but really the art of the session is you're sitting there and you think, I'm going to play 3 tunes or 4 tunes, and I'm going to pick them according to who's in the room. So either I want everyone to join in, so I have to guess who knows what, or I don't want people to join in which case I make some other choices. And sometimes you do that in the middle of a set if the ball gets passed, like you're halfway through a set and then it's going so well, somebody else segues into the next tune. And that's the creative part of playing in an Irish session. It's choosing what tune to play next. And I don't know how Folk Ireland's going to make those decisions. Or should it? And then the only other comment I've got, I suppose, about the whole thing I wanted to throw out there was, I think the competition's really interesting, that you're trying to kind of judge tunes by their quality. And I wondered if that's what causes tunes to survive in the world of traditional Irish folk music or other folk music. I wonder if actually it's a social thing, and I wonder if really what tunes are social memes. So the reason they get popular is because they get popular among a group of people for some reason, then those people carry them to another session, and so on. So I wonder if the tunes we're listening to are the best tunes, traditional, or they're the most socially successful tunes.
Yeah, sometimes it's the titles.
Yeah, or whatever reasons. And so I wonder if judging them by goodness is, I mean, it's a fair thing to do, but whether it's ultimately the acid test of what makes a tune survive in that particular way.
We have observed with Folk Ireland, and when we give musicians tunes without titles, they just have numbers, tune 132. The engagement is much less than if we had generated the titles as well.
Yeah.
Which brings up, one of the early musicians we worked with, Una Monaghan, who's a harper, Irish harper. She said these titles are really strange. They sort of bring authenticity into the mix. Here, where are these titles coming from? The stories.
Yeah. Does it always work, or are there situations with the wrong title can actually damage this authenticity?
Yeah.
Steve, I've got a question. I was fascinated by the idea of the guitar, of giving it to different parts of the community. I'm not sure why it really resonates. When you're giving it to different, you're supposed to put quite a wide range of people. How do they respond? Can you talk a little bit about that, or the range of responses?
Yeah.
When you actually do they ask for instruction, or how?
So most people I've given it to are not at all interested in the technology. I suspect they don't invoke it in performance or anything like that, scan it. I think I'm probably the only person who does that. But what they do seem to want to do is record. Nearly everyone records some bit of their repertoire, some song or a couple of tunes that are meaningful to them. They nearly always explain why they're meaningful to them, and they nearly always talk a bit about the local community. So it's become it feels like a bit of what's called a memory object in oral history. It's become something that's documented, particularly this folk club, and people are clearly building on each other's bits of recording to talk about the history of the club, I suppose.
Are you going to keep doing it?
Yeah, I think so. And particularly as it feels quite poignant, because it wasn't a joke that I am the youngster there, and a number of them are dying, and it's quite interesting that it feels like it's capturing a bit of a moment of that particular group of people. So yes, the plan is to keep doing it. I mean, I'm stuck with it now. Also, never get involved in a research project that's got an open-ended commitment, because you can't get out of it. I mean, my fellow researchers are happy with the idea that a project might run for 3 years, but my musical acquaintances are not, and they keep saying, "Where's that guitar you told us was going to be around forever? What are you doing with it? What's happening to it?" So
No, it's fascinating.
I'm kind of stuck with it now.
All right, we must move on.
Sorry,
Steve is around all week.
Steve, shall we start with the
the
tune?
Yes.
If you want.
Yes.
I'll
Good.
Start the Neode. I don't know if I actually introduced myself before, but I'm Erik Nathanael Gustafsson. I invented this instrument, the Neode, and we're gonna play a tune together, Steve and I. It's called Thank You for Your Feedback, because a friend sent me a beat, a video with him playing. He'd picked up his instrument, a small percussive instrument, connected a contact mic to it, and for some reason it fed back into the speakers in the studio. So we used that as a downbeat, so it became a beat with a really strong downbeat, and I thought that's brilliant. I don't need to play the one at all in this tune, so that's what we're going to do. Can I grab it? And you can just meditate on this graph behind us in the meantime.